This is why you shouldn't get a cold air intake.
Most aftermarket designs use a high flow filter with an open or semi-open design, which will also pull in hot air from the engine. But in order to have a true cold air intake, the filter needs to be sealed and only pull air from the outside. Although options like this exist, they come at a pretty steep price point.
Thankfully for us, our cars already have a sealed intake system, but we should upgrade that filter since it is a wear item, and especially if you're thinking about getting a tune.
Since the hood latch, cables, retaining clips, and sensor can all be removed by hand, you only need a 6mm or flathead for the hose clamp. And in less than 2 minutes, you can have your cold, high flow intake installed. The best part being is that it's less than $100. Here we went with a dry filter, so no oil is required. High flow filters let in more air with their bigger pores compared to OEM paper filters. So in exchange for some filtering capabilities, we get more air going into the turbo. Another bonus is that this filter is reusable. Since air comes up from the bottom, just run unpressurized water from the top with the filter removed and let it air dry before placing it back in. The cheapest sealed intake I could find was at $417, with the cheapest overall at $260. So the goal of this video is to get you an intake that performs like it cost $417 while costing less than $260. The only drawback here is that we won't get the engine bling or intake noise, but we can definitely add in some styling with the next modification.
And now we have a true, cold, high flow intake for less than $100. That won't give us any issues when it's time to smog the car. But since we're well underneath our budget for a cold air intake, let's take some of our savings and optimize the airflow so we can ink out a little bit more power.
Although I've recommended AFE scoops in the past, I recently discovered a larger, more efficient scoop by Velocitech. And this definitely earns its name of the big mouth ram air intake snorkel. This design is intended to go in front of the V-brace and draw in air right as it enters the grille with its bigger opening. Comparing them side by side, I definitely think the Velocitech is worth the extra money, and they even have the data to back it up. But before we get there, we need to remove the grille. Under the weather stripping are 2 lateral T25s and 6 T30s in the middle. Now there should be enough room to pull the bumper out and slide your hand in. Push the inner tabs towards the middle of the grille as you pull from the outside. Starting from the inner corner along the top seem to work the best. As more tabs are undone, it gets easier. Just keep that outward pulling force constant so they don't go back in. B58s, B48s, N20s, and N26s will all have their intake scoops on the left side, while the N55 will be on the right. With the grille off, remove the inner vent grille. Only M cars need dual scoops, but if you wanted to have a symmetrical look, the other side can act as a functional duct to cool the engine bay. Just remove the cover to see how the duct would run. However, that would require 3 additional parts to properly direct the airflow to the engine. Just keep in mind that doing this could put us over budget, but if you can find them cheap on the used marketplace and pair them along with my discount code for the scoops, I would recommend doing it, as these turbocharged cars do run well above their optimal temps. I was able to pick up my set for about $50, and we do need to cut the plastic duct right after the insert for the top rubber support. On the car, it will clip into the rubber duct from the front as it slides onto the rubber support from the top, which slides onto this metal lip under the hood latch, while the rubber duct goes in from the front and has a metal attachment point of its own on the other side. Then press the lip of the duct through the opening to lock it into place. Lastly, the plastic duct has to navigate through some coolant lines, so be careful as you bring it in and press it onto that rubber duct. As for N55 owners, unless you plan on removing the water pump, just do the rubber duct. Getting back to the scoops, the flares on the ends are held in by 4 2mm hex bolts. I know my color choice is boring, but you'll see why I picked it once it's installed. You should also get a bracket along with 2 short as well as 2 long 3mm hex bolts for each scoop. And the scoops are labeled P for passenger or left, and the right side has a cutout. Slide the respective scoop on the V-brace and loosely screw on a long bolt in the back and a short one in the front. Then align and press the scoop against the duct as you tighten the 3mm hex bolts in an alternating pattern until it's secure. For the non-intake side, once the scoop is installed, you can see exactly why Velocitech cut out that portion. This is because they 3D scan each car to ensure the perfect fitment. With that said, M340i's with automatic transmission coolers and aftermarket heat exchangers can't fit the intake scoop. With your scoop or scoops in, press back in your grills and align the bumper to its retaining clips and press it in. Give the bumper a minute to adjust as it should fall back into its original place so it aligns with the hood before putting back on the lateral T25s and middle T30s. On the backside of the weather gasket is a centering dot that aligns to this notch on the bumper. Once it's all pressed in, safely close the hood and take your car for a spin. You should notice a more linear and predictable throttle response, especially from a stop and gear shifts. And that sound is only noticeable because of the microphone placement. You may be able to hear it from the outside, but definitely not from the cabin.
Out of all the colors that Velocitech has to offer, I know I didn't pick the most creative one, but car modifications are kind of frowned upon where I'm from. So if you also need something inconspicuous, this definitely fits the bill. But if you live in an area where fun isn't outlawed, or if you have a show car, perhaps the lit kit is more of what you're looking for.
The lit kit includes the flares, wiring harness, Bluetooth module, and even cable management. The flares go on just like the regular set and are held in by the same 4 2mm hex bolts. The Bluetooth module has these 4 connections and goes on the left scoop with the supplied double-sided tape. The wire should run towards the flat section of the flare. Now connect the intake flare to the module and pay attention to the plug's orientation. The arrows should line up on both ends before pressing them together. Leave the other side disconnected for now, and the other 2 connections can be used for something like underglow, which can all be controlled by the Diode Dynamics app. The kit should also have 3 wires, one that connects to the Bluetooth module, one for power, and the ground for the switch light, which is optional, but it would hook up to the gold terminal on the switch, with the power in the middle and the Bluetooth at the other end. The general mock-up should look like this. The LEDs inside the lit flares are waterproof, making them a little bulkier than the normal flares, but should slide in just as easily. Connect the other flare behind the grille divider, and rather than zip tying the cables to the V-brace, I prefer to use the cable management clips to hold the wires on the upper lip of the bumper, resulting in a very clean look. Connect the wire to the Bluetooth module and run the ends through this hole in the radiator duct. Pull the wires all the way through and undo this T30 so we can run both ground wires underneath the radiator brace. Secure them loosely for now. Now run the ends of these wires along the backside of the headlight to the underside of the fender. With the exception to a single zip tie at the end, no additional cable management was used up top here. The last cable is secured to the front positive terminal and held in by the T50 underneath this panel, and the fuse cover happens to fit perfectly underneath the weather stripping. If you want, you could disconnect the battery before this, but as long as you're not grounded and you use a manual ratchet, you should be fine. Place the end on the terminal, then thread back on the T50. When tightening this, as soon as the plastic begins to deflect, that's tight enough. Now plug in the cables to the switch. That should be in the off position for now. Ground to gold, power in the middle, and Bluetooth last. Tie up the excess cables and tighten down our ground wires by the T30 with them angled like this. Flip the switch and you should have light. Also try hooking it up to the app, which should auto detect. With the Bluetooth connection confirmed, tuck away your wires and ensure they can't get caught on anything. Finally, throw on your grills and test them out. Inside the app, you have full control, which is packed with a ton of features. Obviously, you can turn it on and off, as well as select colors and patterns. Colors can be selected through the color wheel or camera, while the patterns have their own section where you can control the speed. Or if you want, create your own pattern and save it on the app for future use. Here you can pick everything from color order, intensity, transition, and speed. However, I believe the coolest feature is the microphone sync that can react to the song of your choice. Now, regardless of how much fun you want to have with these flares, your car is now ready for a tune, which you can check out in this video. And I'll see you in that one.